I should have known something was wrong when Eleanor smiled at me. My mother-in-law never smiled at me. Not genuinely. In 10 years of marriage to her son Michael, Eleanor Hayes had perfected the art of the frozen smile, lips curved upward, eyes dead as glass, the expression of a woman tolerating an unfortunate stain on her perfect family portrait. But tonight, on Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside the towering windows of the Hayes family mansion, Eleanor looked at me across the candlelit dining table and smiled. Really smiled. Like she'd won something. "Catherine, darling, you've outdone yourself with the decorations," she said, her voice dripping honey over razor blades. "Though I do think the tree would have looked better in the corner by the window. Where we've always placed it. For 40 years. There it was. The compliment wrapped around criticism like a venomous gift. I'd spent 3 days decorating this house for their precious Christmas Eve dinner, just like I'd done every year since marrying Michael. 3 days of garland and lights and making everything perfect for a family that treated me like hired help with a ring on my finger. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady with practice. "I'll remember that for next year." Next year. As if I'd be doing this again. As if I hadn't spent the last 6 months fantasizing about walking away from this family and never looking back. But you don't walk away from the Hayes family. Not when your husband's inheritance is tied up in trusts and family companies and his mother's approval. Not when you've spent 10 years building a life that depends on maintaining the peace. "More wine, Catherine?" Michael asked, barely looking up from his conversation with his sister Jessica. They'd been huddled together all evening, exchanging glances I wasn't supposed to notice, speaking in half-sentences that excluded me completely. "I'm fine," I said. I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for a very long time. The dining room was excessive in that old-money way, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of dead Hayes ancestors judging us from the walls, china so expensive I was afraid to breathe near it. 20 people sat around the table, Michael's extended family, business associates, people who mattered in their world. I'd learned their names, their preferences, their secrets. I'd played the perfect daughter-in-law for a decade. And I was invisible to all of them. "How's your father, Eleanor?" I asked, trying to engage. Thomas Hayes had been in the hospital for 3 weeks, his heart failing slowly but inevitably. The patriarch of the Hayes Empire was dying, and the family was circling like sharks around the blood in the water. Eleanor's smile sharpened. "He's resting. The doctors say he has a few weeks left, maybe less. We've been taking turns sitting with him. I'd like to visit tomorrow," I offered. "Bring him something for Christmas." "That won't be necessary." Eleanor's voice could have frozen the wine in my glass. "Family only during this difficult time. I'm sure you understand. Family only." As if I wasn't family. As if 10 years of marriage, 10 years of tolerating her passive-aggressive warfare, 10 years of shrinking myself to fit into their world didn't count. Michael said nothing. My husband, who promised to love and protect me, sat there in silence while his mother erased me from the family tree right in front of 20 witnesses. Have you ever felt yourself disappearing? Not physically, but socially, emotionally, becoming less real with every dismissal, every slight, every moment of being treated like you don't matter? I excused myself before dessert. No one noticed. I walked through the mansion's hallways, past family photos that didn't include me, past heirlooms I'd never inherit, toward the one place that had always felt like mine, Thomas's study. Michael's father was the only Hayes who'd ever been kind to me. When Eleanor wielded her cruelty like a scalpel, Thomas would quietly defend me. When Jessica made her snide comments, Thomas would change the subject. He was old-fashioned, formal, but decent in a way the rest of his family had forgotten. I shouldn't have gone into his study. It was private, sacred space. But I was exhausted from being perfect, from being invisible, from swallowing my dignity in the name of keeping the peace. I just wanted 5 minutes in a room where someone had actually valued me. The study was dark, smelling of leather and old books and cigar smoke. I sank into Thomas's chair behind the massive mahogany desk and closed my eyes. That's when I heard voices. The study shared a wall with the library, and the voices were coming through the ornate heating vent, Eleanor and Jessica, speaking in hushed tones that carried perfectly through the old mansion's architecture. Signed the new will this morning, Eleanor was saying. Dr. Morrison witnessed it. Everything goes to Michael and Jessica, just as it should. Catherine gets nothing. My blood went cold. Are you sure Dad was coherent enough to sign? Jessica asked. If anyone challenges? He was perfectly coherent. I made sure of that. Reduced his morphine just enough to keep him alert, but not enough to reduce his pain. He would have signed anything to make it stop hurting. The casual cruelty in her voice made my stomach turn. She'd tortured her dying husband into changing his will. What about the original will? Jessica pressed. The one that left the lake house to Catherine? Destroyed. As far as anyone knows, this new will is the only one that exists. Thomas always intended everything to stay in the bloodline. Catherine was a mistake, Michael's mistake. We're simply correcting it. A mistake. 10 years of my life, and I was a mistake they were correcting. She'll be furious, Jessica said, but she sounded delighted by the prospect. She'll be powerless, Eleanor corrected. Without the inheritance, without Thomas's protection, she has no leverage in this family. Michael will divorce her within the year, I've already laid the groundwork. She'll leave with nothing, just another woman who thought she could marry into the Hayes family and forgot her place. They laughed. Actually laughed. I sat in that dark study, listening to my mother-in-law plan my destruction, and something inside me broke. Not broke like shattered, broke like a dam breaking, releasing something that had been building pressure for 10 years. Every smile I'd faked. Every insult I'd swallowed. Every time I'd made myself smaller, quieter, less threatening. Every moment I'd chosen peace over dignity. All of it crystallized into one single, brilliant thought: no more. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The voices continued through the vent, clear as a confession. Michael doesn't even love her anymore, Eleanor was saying. If he ever did. She was useful when he needed someone stable to help him build his career, but now she's just dead weight. And that business she thinks she's so successful at? Real estate investment? Please. She's mediocre at best. I'd built my real estate portfolio from nothing. In 10 years, I'd turned a $50,000 investment into a $7 million empire. I'd done it while managing this family's social calendar, hosting their events, playing the dutiful wife. And Eleanor dismissed it as mediocre. What if she fights the will? Jessica asked. With what money? Her little real estate business is impressive for someone of her background, but she can't afford to fight us. And Michael will side with family. He always does. The recording ran for 15 minutes. They discussed everything: how they'd manipulated Thomas, how they'd been poisoning Michael against me for months, how they'd been planning this since Thomas's diagnosis. They even mentioned forged documents to make the new will seem more legitimate. When the voices finally faded, I sat in the darkness, my phone warm in my hand, and planned. People who underestimate you are giving you a gift. They're showing you their strategy, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Eleanor Hayes thought I was powerless. She thought I was too weak, too dependent, too afraid to fight back. She'd forgotten one critical detail: I was the woman who built a $7 million business while managing her impossible family. I was strategic, patient, and very, very good at playing the long game. I forwarded the recording to 3 people: Sarah Chen, my best friend and one of the best estate attorneys in the state, my own lawyer, and a private investigator I'd kept on retainer since last year, when I'd first sensed something was wrong in my marriage. Then I composed myself, fixed my makeup, and returned to the dining room. There you are, Eleanor said brightly. We were about to send a search party. Just needed some air, I said, smiling. The house is beautiful, Eleanor. Thank you for hosting. She preened, accepting the compliment like it was her due. Michael reached for my hand under the table, and I let him take it. His touch felt like holding hands with a stranger. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked quietly. "You seem off." "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt absolutely clear about what I needed to do. The dinner continued. Dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate torte that probably cost more than most families spent on Christmas. Champagne flowed. The Hayes family laughed and celebrated and basked in their wealth and power. And I sat among them, playing my role perfectly, while the recording on my phone sat like a loaded gun in my purse. That night, in the guest room, because God forbid Michael and I share his childhood bedroom under his mother's roof, I made phone calls. "Sarah, I need you to listen to something." My best friend, my college roommate, the woman who'd warned me about marrying into the Hayes family, listened to the recording in silence. When it finished, she let out a low whistle. "Catherine, this is gold. This is elder abuse, fraud, coercion. We can invalidate that will and possibly press criminal charges." "I don't want criminal charges," I said. "I want justice. And I want them to know exactly who they underestimated." "What's your plan?" "The will reading is scheduled for 3 days after Thomas dies. Eleanor plans to have it at the family lawyer's office, very official and proper. I want you there as my representation." "They'll never allow it." "They won't have a choice. I'm still Michael's wife. I still have legal standing. And I have evidence of fraud." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "You're going to destroy them, aren't you?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve." Over the next 2 weeks, while Thomas Hayes faded in his hospital bed, I prepared. Sarah worked with forensic document experts to examine the new will. The private investigator dug into Eleanor's finances and found interesting patterns: large cash withdrawals, payments to Dr. Morrison that weren't documented as medical expenses, communications with the family lawyer that suggested conspiracy. Michael grew distant, just as Eleanor had planned. He worked late, avoided conversations, flinched when I touched him. The man I'd married was gone, replaced by Eleanor's puppet. I didn't fight it. I played the confused, hurt wife beautifully. I asked what was wrong. I tried to fix things. I made myself smaller and more desperate. And all the while, I built my case like I was preparing for the most important negotiation of my career. Thomas Hayes died on January 8, on a gray Tuesday morning. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. "Family only," Eleanor said. I stayed home while they gathered around his deathbed, while they mourned the man who'd been the only decent person in their corrupt family. At the funeral, I wore black and kept my eyes down. Eleanor accepted condolences like a queen. Jessica played the grieving daughter. Michael looked lost, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt sorry for him. He'd been raised by Eleanor, shaped by her manipulation. He'd never had a chance to be his own person. But then he saw me across the cemetery and looked away, and my sympathy evaporated. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at 2 p.m., at the office of Harrison and Associates, the Hayes family lawyers for 3 generations. I arrived early, with Sarah at my side. We were dressed like we meant business: tailored suits, leather briefcases, the armor of women who weren't there to be dismissed. Eleanor's face when she saw us was priceless. "Catherine, this is a private family matter." "I'm family," I said calmly. "And my attorney is here to ensure my interests are represented." "You have no interests in Thomas's estate," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "We'll let the lawyers determine that," Sarah replied smoothly. The conference room was large and intimidating, all dark wood and legal books and the weight of old money. Michael sat next to Eleanor and Jessica, a united front. Thomas's brother and sister, their children, business partners, everyone who stood to gain or lose from the will's contents, filled the room. Harrison himself, a silver-haired man who'd probably never questioned the Hayes family in his life, cleared his throat. "We're here for the reading of Thomas Jonathan Hayes's last will and testament, executed on December 23 of last year, witnessed by Dr. Morrison and myself." December 23. The day before Christmas Eve. The day Eleanor had tortured her husband into signing away my inheritance. Harrison began reading. It was exactly as Eleanor had planned. The entire estate, the mansion, the lake house, the business holdings, the investment accounts, everything, divided between Michael and Jessica. Not a single mention of me. I was erased completely. As you can see, Eleanor said, looking at me with triumph in her eyes, Thomas's wishes were very clear. Family takes care of family. Blood takes care of blood. The room was silent, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for me to cry, to protest, to show weakness. Instead, I nodded at Sarah. "We'd like to contest this will," Sarah said, her voice clear and professional. Harrison looked annoyed. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that it was obtained through elder abuse, coercion, and fraud." The room exploded. Eleanor shot to her feet. "How dare you?" "We have evidence," Sarah continued calmly, pulling out documents. "Including a recording made on Christmas Eve, in which Mrs. Eleanor Hayes admits to deliberately reducing her husband's pain medication to make him compliant enough to sign a new will. She also discusses destroying the original will, the one that included provisions for Catherine Hayes." I watched the color drain from Eleanor's face. Watched Jessica's eyes go wide with panic. Watched Michael turn to his mother with dawning horror. That's illegal," Harrison stammered. "If this is true." "It's true," I said, standing. "And I have 15 minutes of recorded confession to prove it." Sarah pressed play on her tablet, and Eleanor's voice filled the conference room. "Signed the new will this morning. Dr. Morrison witnessed it. Everything goes to Michael and Jessica, just as it should. Catherine gets nothing." I watched Eleanor's face cycle through emotions: shock, rage, fear, calculation. She was trying to find an angle, a way to spin this, but there was no spinning a recorded confession. "Are you sure Dad was coherent enough to sign?" Jessica's voice came through, tinny but clear. "He was perfectly coherent. I made sure of that. Reduced his morphine just enough to keep him alert, but not enough to reduce his pain. He would have signed anything to make it stop hurting." Someone gasped. Thomas's sister Margaret pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even some of Eleanor's allies looked horrified. The recording continued, laying out the entire conspiracy. The destroyed original will. The manipulation. The plan to push me out of the family. Every cruel word, every calculated move, preserved perfectly in digital clarity. When it finished, the silence was deafening. Harrison looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a criminal matter. I can't proceed with this will reading. I have to report this to." "You'll do no such thing," Eleanor hissed. But her voice lacked its usual authority. She looked around the room, searching for support, and found none. Even her own relatives were staring at her with disgust. "Actually," Sarah said, "we've already reported it. The district attorney's office has been notified. But we're not here for criminal prosecution, not primarily. We're here because Catherine Hayes has a legal right to the inheritance Thomas intended for her." "You can't prove what he intended," Eleanor said desperately. "That recording doesn't." "We don't need the recording to prove intent," I said, finally standing. My voice was steady, cold, everything I'd been holding back for 10 years. "We have something better." Sarah pulled out another document. 3 years ago, Thomas Hayes executed a comprehensive estate plan with a different firm, one Eleanor didn't know about. That will, properly witnessed and notarized, leaves specific provisions for Catherine. Including the lake house property, a trust fund of $2 million, and shares in Hayes Holdings. I'd found that will 2 weeks ago, hidden in Thomas's study in a locked drawer. He'd given me the key years ago, told me it contained important documents I might need someday. At the time, I thought he was being overly dramatic. Now I understood, he'd been protecting me from his own family. Eleanor lunged forward, trying to grab the document, but Harrison blocked her. "Mrs. Hayes, sit down. If there's a prior valid will." It's dated 4 years ago, Sarah continued. It supersedes the one from December 23rd, which we're arguing is invalid due to coercion. But even if that will were valid, this earlier will establish as a pattern of intent. Thomas Hayes wanted Catherine to be provided for. She was a gold digger. Eleanor shrieked, abandoning all pretense of dignity. She married Michael for money, and Thomas was too senile to see it. I married Michael because I loved him, I said quietly. But that woman is gone. The woman standing here now has built her own fortune. I don't need your money, Eleanor. I never did. But I will take what Thomas wanted me to have, because he was the only person in this family who treated me like I mattered. Michael finally spoke, his voice small and broken. Catherine, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Mother was planning. Yes, you did, I said, and I saw him flinch. Maybe not the specifics. Maybe you didn't know about the morphine or the destroyed will. But you knew she was pushing me out. You knew she was treating me like garbage. And you did nothing. You chose her over me, every single time. I love you, he said desperately. No, you don't. You love the idea of having a wife who makes you look good. You love having someone to manage your life while you focus on your career. But you've never loved me enough to defend me. Not once in 10 years. The truth of it hung in the air between us. People who'd known us as a couple looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing their own failed marriages and ours. The district attorney is very interested in the elder abuse charges, Sarah continued, pulling the conversation back to business. Deliberately reducing pain medication to coerce a signature from a dying man is a serious crime. Dr. Morrison has already been interviewed and confirmed that Eleanor requested specific medication adjustments that were not medically indicated. Eleanor's lawyer, a nervous-looking man who'd been silent until now, leaned in to whisper to her. She shook her head violently, but he kept talking, urgent and insistent. However, Sarah said, and I heard the shift in her tone, Catherine is willing to consider a settlement. She has no desire to see anyone imprisoned. She simply wants what's fair. This was the part we'd planned carefully. I could have destroyed them completely, criminal charges, public scandal, the Hayes name dragged through every newspaper and gossip site. But that would have made me like them, and I refused to become Eleanor Hayes. Here are our terms, I said, pulling out a document we'd prepared. First, the lake house property is transferred to me immediately, per Thomas's original intent. Second, I receive the $2 million trust fund Thomas established for me. Third, I retain my shares in Hayes Holdings, shares that Thomas gifted me 5 years ago, which Eleanor has been trying to transfer back to the family accounts. Jessica started to object, but Eleanor's lawyer silenced her with a look. Fourth, I continued, Michael and I divorce. I keep everything I brought into the marriage and everything I built during it, my real estate portfolio, my investment accounts, my business. He keeps his inheritance and the family assets. Clean split, no alimony either direction. And what do we get in return? Eleanor asked bitterly. I don't press criminal charges. I don't give this recording to the media. The Hayes name stays intact, damaged, perhaps, but not destroyed. You get to keep your reputation, your social standing, your precious legacy. That's blackmail, Jessica sputtered. That's mercy, I corrected. Real blackmail would be demanding half of everything and threatening to ruin you if you didn't comply. I'm simply taking what's mine and letting you keep what's yours. Harrison looked between us, clearly calculating. Mrs. Hayes, I strongly advise you to accept these terms. If this recording becomes public, the legal and social consequences will be catastrophic. The estate could be tied up in litigation for years. The elder abuse charges alone. I know what the charges are, Eleanor snapped. But I could see her deflating, the fight going out of her. She'd played her hand and lost, and she knew it. I need time to think, she said. You have 1 hour, Sarah replied. After that, we file everything with the court and release the recording to the media. Your choice. We left them in the conference room and waited in the lobby. I sat in a leather chair, looking out at the city skyline, feeling strangely calm. This moment, this confrontation, I'd been building toward it for 10 years without realizing it. Every time I'd swallowed my anger, every time I'd chosen dignity over drama, I'd been storing ammunition for this exact moment. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked. "Powerful," I said honestly. "For the first time in my marriage, I feel like myself." 43 minutes later, Harrison emerged. "They've accepted your terms. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes wants to avoid any public proceedings. We'll have the documents drawn up by end of business tomorrow." "Good," Sarah said. "And the recording?" "Will remain confidential, per the settlement agreement. As long as Mrs. Catherine Hayes receives everything stipulated." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "I want to see Eleanor." Sarah grabbed my arm. "Catherine, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." I walked back into the conference room. Eleanor sat alone at the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Jessica had left, probably to start damage control. Michael stood by the window, his back to his mother, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Eleanor," I said. She looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. She was afraid of me. "You won," she said bitterly. "Congratulations. You got what you wanted." "No," I said. "I got what Thomas wanted me to have." "There's a difference. You spent 10 years trying to make me feel worthless, trying to erase me from this family. You turned your son against me. You manipulated a dying man. And for what? To keep money in the bloodline? To maintain control? You don't understand what it takes to protect a legacy," Eleanor said. "I understand that legacy means nothing if you have to torture people to maintain it. I understand that Thomas built something good, and you've spent years corrupting it. And I understand that you lost today not because I was stronger, but because you underestimated how much strength it takes to endure a family like yours." I turned to Michael. "I loved you. I really did. But you were never going to choose me over her, were you?" He finally turned around, and I saw tears on his face. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. But sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't give me back 10 years. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Is there any chance we could try again? Start over?" I almost laughed. After everything, he still thought there was a way back. "Michael, I don't love you anymore. I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm just done. We're different people who want different things. You want a wife who fits into your mother's perfect picture. I want to be myself. Those things are incompatible." "So that's it?" Eleanor said sharply. "You take your pound of flesh and walk away?" "No," I said. "I take what's mine and build a new life. There's a difference." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Sarah caught up with me at the elevator. "That was incredible," she said. "You were incredible." I was patient, I corrected. There's power in patience. They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back immediately. They didn't realize I was gathering strength. The elevator doors opened, and we stepped inside. As we descended toward the lobby, toward my new life, Sarah said, "So what now?" "Now?" I smiled. "Now I live." 3 months later, I stood on the deck of the lake house, my lake house, watching the sun set over the water. The property was everything Thomas had promised: peaceful, beautiful, mine. No one could take it from me. No one could make me feel small here. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Michael hadn't fought me on anything, probably out of guilt, possibly out of fear of what else I might reveal. Eleanor had retreated to the family mansion, her social standing damaged but not destroyed. She'd resigned from several boards, citing health concerns. People whispered, but no one knew the full story. The recording stayed private, per our agreement. I kept my word, even though they probably wouldn't have kept theirs. My real estate business was thriving. Without the constant drain of Hayes family drama, I had energy to focus on growing it. I'd just closed a deal on a commercial property downtown that would net me $3 million in profit. I was successful on my own terms, answering to no one. My phone rang. Sarah. Hey, I answered. What's up? You need to see the news. Jessica just got arrested. What? For what? Tax fraud, apparently. The investigation into Eleanor's finances uncovered some irregularities. Turns out Jessica was hiding assets overseas, claiming deductions that didn't exist. The IRS is not amused. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. I hadn't pursued that angle, but karma apparently had her own schedule. And there's more, Sarah continued. Michael called me. He wants to talk to you. Tell him no. He says it's important. About the family business. Apparently, without Thomas's guidance and with Eleanor's reputation damaged, they're hemorrhaging clients. He wants to know if you'd consider investing or consulting. I laughed, actually laughed. He wants me to save them? After everything? I told him you'd say no. But I wanted you to hear it. I wanted you to know they need you now. Good, I said. Let them need me. Let them understand what they lost when they decided I didn't matter. You're not even a little bit tempted to help. Not even slightly. They made their choices. They can live with the consequences. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the deck, watching the stars emerge. Some people might call me cold for refusing to help Michael. Some might say I should be the bigger person, offer forgiveness, extend mercy. But those people hadn't spent 10 years being slowly erased by a family that saw them as disposable. Those people hadn't been tortured by 1,000 small cruelties, then called sensitive when they finally reacted. Those people hadn't built themselves back up from nothing while everyone around them tried to keep them small. I wasn't cold. I was free. The woman who married into the Hayes family was gone, dissolved in the acid of Eleanor's contempt and Michael's cowardice. The woman who'd tried so hard to be enough for people who would never accept her, she didn't exist anymore. The woman who sat on this deck, financially independent, emotionally whole, answering to no one, that was who I'd always been underneath. I'd just forgotten for a little while. My phone buzzed with a text. An unknown number. I'm proud of you. You were always stronger than they realized. Thomas. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Then I realized, it was from Sarah, using a number I wouldn't recognize. She'd known I needed to hear those words, even as a fiction. Or maybe not entirely fiction. Thomas had seen my strength when no one else did. He protected me the only way he could, with that hidden will and that locked drawer and the key pressed into my hand years ago. Maybe he'd always known I'd need it someday. I typed back, thank you. For everything. The sun had fully set now, the lake black as glass, the sky infinite above me. In the morning, I had meetings, potential investors, new properties, the expanding empire I was building one strategic decision at a time. But tonight, I just sat in the peace of knowing I'd won. Not through cruelty or manipulation. Not by becoming like Eleanor or playing her games. I'd won by refusing to let them define my worth, by gathering my evidence patiently, by striking only when the time was right. Some people collect art. Some collect cars. I'd collected 10 years of injustices and turned them into leverage. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice tastes better than any victory could. People always ask, don't you wish you'd left earlier? Don't you regret staying so long? The answer is no. If I'd left earlier, I wouldn't have had the recording. I wouldn't have found the will. I wouldn't have built the case that gave me everything I deserved. I wouldn't have learned that patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. Every moment I'd endured, every insult I'd swallowed, every time I'd smiled through the humiliation, all of it had been preparation for the moment when I'd finally show them who they'd been underestimating. The night air was cool against my skin. Somewhere across the lake, music drifted from another house, people laughing, celebrating, living their lives. I raised my glass in their direction, then to the lake, then to the sky. To Thomas, I whispered. For seeing me when no one else did. And to myself, silently, for never forgetting who I was, even when they tried to make me disappear. The lake house would be my sanctuary. My real estate empire would be my legacy. My freedom would be my revenge, the best revenge, the kind that doesn't require anyone else's suffering, only my own success. Eleanor Hayes had tried to erase me from her family's story. Instead, she'd taught me the most valuable lesson of my life: the only person whose approval I needed was my own. I didn't need the Hayes name. I didn't need their money, not really, though taking what Thomas intended for me felt satisfyingly just. I didn't need Michael's love or Eleanor's acceptance or Jessica's respect. I just needed to remember that I was Catherine Hayes, the one who survived, the one who strategized, the one who walked away with her dignity intact and her bank account full. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations and passionate reconciliations. Mine ended with a quiet evening on a deck I owned, looking at a lake I'd earned the right to enjoy, planning a future that belonged entirely to me. That's not the ending Eleanor wanted for me. It's not the ending Michael expected. It's not even the ending I imagined when I first discovered their betrayal. But it's the ending I deserved. And after 10 years of fighting for crumbs of affection from people who would never truly value me, I'd learned something crucial: the only person who needed to believe I was worthy was me. I believed it now. Fully. Completely. Unshakably. And that belief was worth more than any inheritance, any family name, any redemption arc where I forgave people who never apologized. The woman who needed their approval was gone. The woman who remained needed nothing from them at all. And that, finally, was freedom.